At some point this year, almost without noticing, you started running. You ran to keep up, you ran to arrive on time, you ran so you wouldn't fall behind. You ran so much that you stopped noticing the moment time began slipping through your fingers like warm water you just couldn't hold. And now you're here, looking at the last days of the calendar the way someone watches an hourglass that's down to its final grains. 20 days. Only 20. And even though the world insists on telling you that it's over, that there's no time left, that it doesn't matter anymore, you know that's not true. There's a part of you, small maybe, quiet, but alive, that keeps whispering that these final days can still change everything, not because they're magical, but because they are decisive. When something is about to end, the mind wakes up. Awareness sharpens. Life shows you, without disguise, who you've been all year, and who you still have time to stop being. That's why this episode isn't some end-of-year ritual or a shallow list of resolutions forgotten by February. This episode is a threshold, a border between who you were and who you're called to become. You didn't arrive here by accident. You arrived because you know, even if you haven't said it out loud, that you cannot allow another year to end with that bitter feeling of, I could have done more. You arrived because you recognize there's a part of your life still unfinished, unsettled, postponed, and you feel its weight. And because, on some deeper level, you've understood that the year doesn't truly end on December 31st, but when you decide to end it, when you decide to face what you avoided, when you decide to change, even if the calendar claims there's no time left. But listen closely. 20 days aren't a punishment, they're a gift. A concentrated, intense, honest space in which you can do what you avoided for months. In 20 days, you can recover discipline. You can recover clarity. You can recover integrity. You can reclaim your word, that silent promise you've owed yourself for so long. In 20 days, you can change your relationship with your habits, your emotions, your mind. You can close doors that should have been closed years ago and open others you were afraid to touch. You can let go of old versions of yourself that no longer represent you, and you can lay the first stone of the year you truly want to build. And maybe right now you're thinking it's too late, that important things require months, even years. But that's an illusion created by fear. What transforms life isn't time, it's intention. One true decision can do more than 30 half-hearted ones. One aligned action can outperform 100 wishful thoughts. A truth accepted at the right moment can save you from repeating 10 identical years. Change isn't a long process, it's an instant repeated. And each of these 20 days will be exactly that. A chance to change in the right instant. Let me say it without sugarcoating. The reason you haven't transformed your life is not lack of capacity, not lack of opportunity, not lack of strength. The reason is that you've been waiting for the ideal moment. You've waited to feel ready. You've waited for motivation, clarity, energy, signs. You've waited for January. And while you waited, time kept moving without you. Stoicism teaches this with brutal honesty. Life does not wait. Destiny doesn't pause for you to get organized. Opportunity doesn't accept appointments. Transformation begins when you begin, even if you're tired, even if you're unsure, even if the world says it's pointless. Action creates meaning. Discipline creates identity. Commitment creates destiny. So today, I want you to hear something with absolute seriousness. These 20 days are not for improving your life. They are for reclaiming your power. For proving to yourself that you can do in 20 days what you didn't do in 300. For remembering that when you decide to act with firmness, life responds. For learning that you don't need a new year to become someone new. You just need to decide that today you will not repeat what destroys you, that today you will not negotiate your word, that today you will move forward even if it's one small step, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's imperfect. Because perfection has never changed anyone. Movement has. And right now, as you hear my voice, I want you to imagine something, that this episode is the beginning of your personal declaration, not towards the world, towards yourself. That these 20 days will be your inner laboratory, your test, your rebirth, that in 20 days you will learn to see yourself without excuses, without lies, without self-justification. That you will close what still hurts, organize what still weighs on you, finish what you've avoided. And that when day 20 arrives, you won't need fireworks to feel that something changed, because the change will be in you, in your character, in the way you wake up, in the way you decide, in the way you speak to yourself. This episode is for those who are tired of postponing, for those who can't stand another broken promise, for those who know they have more inside but haven't brought it out yet. And if you're here, it's not by chance. It's because you're ready to make these final days the most important of the year, not out of obligation, but conviction. Not to please anyone, but to honor yourself. Not to change the world, but to change your world. And trust me, when you change, everything else finds its place. So take a deep breath, sit with your own life, look at it without fear, because in the next few minutes, you'll discover that you don't need a new year for a new life. You just need a decision, a discipline. And these 20 days, let's begin. Before we start, I want you to declare your commitment by leaving in the comments, "Starting today, I will not repeat the version of myself that held me back this year." That phrase isn't a slogan. It's a rupture. It's the signal that you will no longer carry the habits, fears, or excuses that drained your strength for months. It's a reminder that you are here to close a cycle consciously, not drag it into the next year. This is the moment you decide that your change doesn't begin on January 1st. It begins today. Without further delay, let's begin. First Stoic principle. Don't wait for January to become who you already know you must be. Take a deep breath, because what I'm about to tell you is not comfortable, but it is necessary. There is no such thing as a perfect moment to start changing your life. There is no magical Monday, no symbolic first day of January, no moment where everything suddenly becomes easier, clearer, or more convenient. The mind loves to postpone, because postponing allows us to maintain the illusion that someday at some distant chapter of our story will finally become better. But that chapter never comes. The truth, the one no one wants to say out loud, is that life only changes when you change, and you only change when you decide to do it now. Not tomorrow, not later, now. And when you truly understand this, when you feel it in your body, something inside you shifts, because you realize you've been waiting for a permission you never needed. Start by looking at something you almost always ignore, your resistance. That inner voice that tells you, later, when I'm ready, when I have more energy, when I'm not so tired. That voice is not your ally. It's the guardian of the self that fears evolving. And if you allow it to keep directing your life, you'll arrive at the end of this year and many others being exactly the same person you once swore you would leave behind. Resistance doesn't disappear by magic. It weakens when you challenge it. And the challenge begins with a tiny but definitive act. Doing something today. Something concrete. Something that moves you even a millimeter closer to the person you know you're meant to be. But here comes the part that hurts. You already know what you need to do. You don't need more clarity. You don't need more signs. You don't need more books, more motivation, or more speeches. You know which habit is destroying you, which decision you're avoiding, which conversation you've postponed, which discipline you've abandoned, which behavior you keep repeating even though it hurts you. You know. You've always known. And this is the real reason you wait for January. Because January gives you the illusion that you can change without facing your discomfort today. As if change were automatic. As if the calendar would somehow gift you strength, willpower, or courage. What changes your life is not a date, it's an internal standard. And that standard is built on ordinary days, not symbolic ones. Days where no one applauds you, where no one notices, where no one knows you're fighting your own excuses. Silent days that aren't posted on social media, that no one celebrates, but that quietly determine your destiny. If you're waiting for January, you're not waiting for a beginning, you're avoiding a confrontation. And that avoidance has a high cost, because every day you postpone is another day reinforcing the identity you're trying to outgrow. Look at it this way. The last 20 days of the year are not a closing, they're a door. A door that only opens for those willing to act when everyone else is giving up. A door that separates those who live according to an external calendar from those who live according to an internal principle. The first group waits for January. Stoics begin when they must. And you know perfectly well you need to begin now. Because if you don't do it today, you won't do it tomorrow. And if you don't do it during these days, the weight of what's unfinished will follow you into the next year, disguised as resolutions you won't keep. Ask yourself, with brutal honesty, how many Januaries have you wasted promising that, this time, yes? How many times have you sworn you'd change your life while protecting the same habits, the same fears, the same excuses? How many times did you say later when life was clearly asking you for now? The first Stoic principle for these last days of the year is this: stop negotiating with yourself. Stop acting as if your transformation can wait. Stop behaving as if your life has an infinite calendar. Because it doesn't. What you do today, even if it's small, has far more power than what you dream of doing on January 1st. Because a small act breaks the pattern. It breaks the old identity. It breaks the lie that you need to feel ready before you can act. Stoics taught that acting before you feel ready is an act of self-mastery. And self-mastery is the root of all lasting change. This is not about running a marathon today. It's about starting. About doing something concrete that proves to your mind that fear, comfort, habit, and routine no longer rule you. A gesture that tells your future you're willing to meet it on a different level. Think of it this way. If you can't start now, when all you need is will, you won't start later, when your mind finds 1,000 reasons to distract you. The Stoic understands that time is a moral exercise. Every day is a chance to show who you are, not who you say you are, who you decide to be when no one is watching. When the whole world is celebrating, resting, or postponing, you can become someone different. And that is your real power. Not doing what everyone does, but doing what you know you must do. And here is an uncomfortable but liberating truth. If you decide to change your life in the last 20 days of the year, you don't just change these days, you change the entire year ahead. Because you enter January transformed, not hoping to transform, you enter with discipline, not intentions, with action, not promises, with identity, not excuses. January stops being a beginning and becomes a continuation, and that is the real secret of those who truly change their lives. They don't start in January because they were already walking in December. Let me say it as directly as possible. Stop waiting for a new year. Start building a new you. You don't need a symbolic beginning, you need a real decision. A decision you can make today, right now, without ceremony, without speeches, without delay. A decision that marks the end of the version of you that you no longer want to carry. Start today, even if it's small. Start today, even if you're afraid. Start today, even if your mind screams at you to wait. Because today is all you have, and today is enough. Second Stoic principle: finish what you started, even if it's small. There is something profoundly transformative about finishing what you once left incomplete. Not because the act itself is heroic, but because closing what's unfinished is one of the most powerful ways to reclaim the parts of yourself you abandoned along the way. Every project left open, every postponed conversation, every half-formed habit, every goal left hanging, all of them are loose threads silently draining your energy. They live in the background, quietly taking up mental space, stealing clarity, reminding you again and again that there are things you promised yourself and never completed. And when you live surrounded by unresolved tasks, your soul gets congested. You feel tired for no reason, scattered without explanation, confused without knowing why. But the reason is simple. What you don't close follows you. What you don't complete weighs on you. What you don't face ends up governing you. The last 20 days of the year are the perfect territory to reclaim that power. Not to achieve something huge, not to reinvent yourself in one dramatic sweep, but to pick up the small things you left undone and prove to yourself that you can finish. The mind grows stronger through small completions. Completions build discipline, and discipline builds identity. And your identity, whether you realize it or not, is shaped far more by what you finish than by what you start. Anyone can begin a habit, a project, a change, but only those who finish become the kind of person who earns respect, even self-respect. Pause for a moment and think, what did you leave halfway through this year? Maybe a book abandoned on page 22, a workout routine you dropped in month 3, a journal with only 3 pages written, a promise you made to yourself in a moment of clarity and then forgot, a conversation you avoided, a space you never organized, a project you kept saying, I'll get back to it later. Look at all of that with honesty, not guilt, but clarity. Everything you started had a purpose. Something called you. Something moved you. Something awakened inside you. You didn't start by accident. There was intention behind it, and that intention deserves closure. But here's the part that truly reshapes your life. Finishing even something small has a massive impact because it breaks your internal narrative. If your mind is used to quitting, used to postponing, used to delaying what you know you must finish, then choosing to close even a tiny cycle sends a direct and powerful message to your identity. I am no longer someone who abandons things. And when that sentence changes, your entire life changes. Because a person who finishes the small things is capable of finishing the big ones. A person who keeps their word, even when no one is watching, develops an inner strength that is unshakable. Finishing something pending is not just a practical act, it is a spiritual act. When you close a cycle, you also close anxiety, noise, inner conflict. It's like cleaning a corner of your mind that has been gathering dust for months. And when you clean a corner, you create space. And when you create space, clarity appears. And when clarity appears, direction follows. What weighs you down is not what you do, it's what you avoid. What drains you is not the effort, it's the accumulation of things you never faced. Seneca understood this better than anyone. He said, "No wind is favorable to the sailor who doesn't know to which port he sails. But the port doesn't matter if your sails are tangled in knots of unfinished business." What good is a grand plan for next year if you arrive in January carrying the psychological fatigue of an entire year of things left undone? The weight isn't in the task itself, it's in the silent guilt it creates. Because every time you see something incomplete, it reminds you of a version of yourself you no longer want to be. And when you decide to close even a tiny loop, that old version begins to die. That's where transformation starts. And here's something essential. You don't have to finish everything. This is not about turning the last 20 days into a frantic race to accomplish the impossible. That would only be another form of empty self-pressure. What I'm asking, what Stoic philosophy invites you to do, is to choose one thing, just one, something that resonates with you, something you can finish before the year ends. Finish it not to show anyone, but to show yourself that your word matters, that you're capable, that you don't need external motivation, that you're no longer the person who quits halfway through, that you can close. When you choose to finish one thing, you shift the internal vibration of your entire life. Maybe it's organizing your room, maybe it's sending that message, maybe it's going back to the gym today, maybe it's finishing that book you put on pause, maybe it's clearing your desk, maybe it's ending an internal debate you've been repeating for months. The size doesn't matter, the closure does, because the mind breathes differently when it knows you follow through on what you say. There is a kind of strength that emerges when you do this, the strength of self-governance. Marcus Aurelius wrote often about ruling one's own soul, about guiding it the way an emperor guides a kingdom. And how can you rule your soul if you can't rule a simple task? How can you expect to conquer your big goals if you can't complete your small responsibilities? A kingdom is not strengthened by great wars won, but by internal order. And your inner kingdom, your life, your mind, your discipline also needs order. Order created by you, not by the calendar. Finishing what you started also restores something powerful. Dignity. Yes, dignity. Because every unfinished task is a small betrayal of yourself, a quiet, broken promise. And when you close it, you reconcile with yourself. You treat yourself with respect. You honor your word. Dignity isn't built through grand speeches, but through silent actions no one else sees. Through keeping promises in secret. Through saying, "I'll do it," and doing it. That's where character strengthens. And let me tell you something else. Finishing something today will have more impact than starting 10 things in January. Because closure has real weight. Closure frees you. Closure aligns you. And when you arrive in January aligned, you don't need resolutions because you already come transformed. You begin the year from a higher level, not from zero. While everyone else starts with a burst of enthusiasm that will fade in a week, you'll start with discipline. While others hope the calendar changes them, you'll arrive already changed. So ask yourself right now, what will I finish before this year ends? Don't overthink it. Your mind already knows the answer. That book, that email, that drawer, that habit, that conversation, that corner you need to clean, that workout you've been postponing. Choose one, just one, and finish it. Not tomorrow, today. Even if your progress is small, because closing something pending is the most powerful way to remind yourself that your life changes when you change, not when the calendar changes. And when you do it, when you finally close that thing you've been avoiding, you'll feel something immediate. Relief, lightness, strength. And a sentence will echo inside you with a truth impossible to ignore. If I could finish this, I can finish what comes next. That sentence will be the beginning of your next year. And that beginning will be real, solid, unbreakable. Because you will have stopped being someone who abandons and started becoming someone who completes. And that, even if it seems small, changes absolutely everything. Third Stoic principle: clean your environment to clear your mind. There is a quiet truth most people overlook. Your environment speaks. It speaks louder than you do, louder than your thoughts, louder than what you are willing to admit. And even if you don't notice it, It shapes your mental state every second of the day. When you live surrounded by clutter, when corners are filled with things you never use, when your spaces hold objects tied to old stories or past versions of you that no longer exist, your mind becomes polluted without you realizing it. And it's not a loud kind of pollution. It's slow, constant, invisible. It's that subtle heaviness you can't explain, that emotional weight that appears even on calm days, that inability to focus even when you have the time, that mental fatigue that hits you the moment you open your eyes. All of that, more often than not, comes from the environment you tolerate. The last 20 days of the year are the perfect invitation to look at your spaces with brutal honesty. Not from an aesthetic perspective, but from a philosophical one. Because Stoicism understood something essential. Your external world is a mirror of the internal order you're willing to build. When you clean your environment, you're not moving objects, you're moving your life. You're not throwing things away, you're releasing weights. You're not rearranging a room, you're rearranging your mind. Think about this. Every object you keep, every old paper, every piece of clothing you never wear, every item saved, just in case, every physical reminder of a moment that no longer serves you occupies mental space. Not just physical space, mental space. Everything you possess demands a tiny portion of your attention. Even if you don't look at it, even if it's hidden in a drawer, your mind knows it's there. And when you accumulate too much, your mind fills with silent noise. It becomes impossible to search for clarity while living surrounded by things that represent past versions of yourself, unfinished decisions, dissolved connections, or habits you allowed to die. That is why cleaning your environment is not a practical action, it is a spiritual one. Seneca said it differently. Be mindful of what you allow into your life. He wasn't only referring to people, he meant everything. Because everything that enters your space also enters your mind. And when you don't choose intentionally, accumulation becomes your identity. You end up living in a museum of who you used to be, instead of a sanctuary for who you're becoming. During these last days of the year, I invite you to do something deeply stoic. Ask every object you own whether it still represents a part of your purpose, not whether it's useful, not whether it might come in handy someday, not whether it was expensive. Ask if it belongs to the life you're trying to build now. If not, let it go. Freedom isn't always gained by acquiring things. Often, it's gained by releasing them. And this isn't about becoming a minimalist. It's not about living with a suitcase or giving up everything. It's about not being a slave to your possessions. It's about not letting every corner of your home remind you of something you've been avoiding. It's about letting your space reflect your strength, not your confusion. Because a crowded space creates a crowded mind, and a crowded mind cannot make clear decisions, cannot think deeply, cannot feel in order. Picture a desk covered in things, stacked papers, half-empty cups, notebooks you never use, wires, receipts, random objects. How do you feel when you sit there? Your mind can't focus because your attention is being pulled toward 1,000 insignificant details. Each item demands a micro-decision you don't want to make. And when you postpone enough micro-decisions, your brain enters a state of anticipatory exhaustion. That tiredness you feel, even before starting, is not laziness, it's cognitive overload. And it is solved by cleaning, not by motivating yourself. Now picture a clean space, intentional, not perfect. A place where everything has purpose, place, and meaning. How do you feel there? You feel spacious. You feel calm. You feel invited to think. Your mind expands because it is no longer dealing with a flood of useless stimuli. Your soul can breathe. And that capacity to breathe is what allows your life to change. Stoic philosophy understood that your environment should support your soul, not distract it. That's why many Stoics lived simply not out of poverty, but out of clarity. Having less allowed them to think more. Order allowed them to see their path clearly. Simple spaces allowed them to listen to their mind without interference. And you can replicate that in these final days of the year by doing something as simple as picking up a bag and letting go of what no longer represents you. You'll notice something interesting. When you clean your environment, you also clean your emotions. You'll find objects tied to people who are no longer part of your life. Release them. You'll find things that remind you of times when you didn't treat yourself well. Let them go. You'll find clothes you keep out of nostalgia rather than usefulness. Donate them. You'll find papers, photos, messages, broken things, useless things you keep out of inertia. All of those are anchors, not memories. And these last 20 days are not for holding on, they are for liberating yourself. Remember something essential. The past should be honored, not stored. What shaped you already lives inside you. You don't need objects to remember it. Keeping things that tie you to old pain doesn't make you loyal to your story, it makes you a prisoner of it. And you are here to change, to be reborn, to step into a version of yourself that requires space to exist. And that space must be created by you. When you clean your environment, you also clean your energy. You discover you have more strength, more motivation, more focus. You wake up feeling different. Even your breathing changes. Nothing weighs as heavily as an environment that constantly reminds you of what you avoid, and nothing frees you as deeply as an environment that invites you to move forward. So in these last 20 days, clean, but clean with intention. Not so it looks better, but so you feel better, so your mind stops carrying what's unnecessary, so your soul can feel lighter, so your life can enter a different frequency. Sometimes the deepest change begins by moving a single object. Sometimes transformation starts when you decide you no longer want to live inside the same emotional clutter. Do it slowly, but do it. Open a drawer and decide what belongs to your future and what belongs to your past. Open your closet and ask which version of yourself each piece of clothing represents. Open your digital folders, your photos, your notes. Delete what no longer serves you. Every item you release creates space for who you are becoming. And when you're done, when you look at your space with the clarity of someone who reclaimed command over their environment, you'll feel something impossible to ignore. A lighter mind, a steadier energy, a calmer spirit. Because cleaning your environment is not a domestic act, it is a philosophical one. And when done consciously, it reveals a truth that can transform your entire life. External order creates the space where your new life can begin. Fourth Stoic principle. Reconcile with at least one person, even if only in your heart. There are wounds that don't bleed, yet breathe inside you as if they had a life of their own. They are quiet, persistent, unsettling. They hide behind your gestures, your temperament, your decisions, even your silence. Wounds that don't come from the present, but from the distant echo of a past you're still carrying without realizing it. It doesn't matter how many years have passed, what remains unresolved continues to live within you. And when the end of the year approaches, those final 20 days act like a ruthless mirror, a sort of cosmic reminder that some things still weigh far more than they should. That is why this principle exists. Not to make you return to people who harmed you, not to reopen chapters that are already closed, not to repair what cannot be repaired. This principle exists because true reconciliation does not always require a conversation. Many times it requires releasing an internal knot that drains your strength, your presence, your energy, your life. Refusing to reconcile with that part of your soul is choosing to walk with an invisible stone in your chest, and no one can change their life while still breathing through resentment. Stoicism understood something most people forget. What affects you is not what others did, but the story you continue telling yourself about what happened. The event is over. What remains is the interpretation you repeat every day. And if you don't transform that interpretation, it traps you in an emotional cycle that makes you a prisoner of someone who may no longer even be part of your life. Deep reconciliation isn't about allowing someone back in. It's about allowing yourself to move forward. Because some people don't return, yet their shadow keeps walking beside you. And you're not here to continue living accompanied by shadows. You're here to create internal space, clarity, direction, and peace. Marcus Aurelius said that forgiveness is a form of freeing yourself, not because the other person deserves it, but because you deserve rest. And that rest is not emotional, it's vital. It's how you reclaim the energy you left stuck in moments that happened years ago. Much of the exhaustion you feel today doesn't come from the present. It comes from emotional weight you never released. Think about how often you remember that argument, that betrayal, that disappointment, that thing you heard that you should never have heard, that action that should never have happened. Every memory is a tiny leak in your energy, draining you without your awareness. And so, you walk through life tired, but don't know why. You react tensely, but think it's your personality. You live guarded, but assume it's wisdom. It's not temperament, and it's not wisdom, it's burden. And that burden lifts when you decide to remember not from the wound, but from maturity. Reconciliation isn't meant to change the past. It's meant to stop you from reliving it. And the most liberating part is that you can do it without calling, without writing, without explaining, without exposing yourself. You can do it silently. You can do it in your mind, in your heart, in your spirit. You can sit alone, breathe deeply, and say to yourself, I release you. I let you go. I no longer carry you with me. That simple act, repeated with honesty, changes the way you breathe and the way you make decisions. Because when resentment rules you, every decision becomes a defense mechanism. When inner peace rules you, every decision becomes an act of freedom. But reconciliation does not mean justifying what happened. It does not mean minimizing it. It does not mean romanticizing pain or denying injustice. It means accepting that it already happened and that you no longer want to live chained to it. It means realizing that carrying the thorn only perpetuates the wound. It means acknowledging that life continues and you deserve to move forward without dragging a past that has already served its purpose. Stoicism taught that virtue is born when we release what is no longer under our control, and the past, no matter how painful, is no longer under your control. The only thing you control now is how you remember it, and what you choose to do with that memory. Close your eyes for a moment. Think of someone with whom you still carry an emotional knot. It might be someone who disappointed you, someone who betrayed you, someone who vanished without explanation, someone who left, someone you pushed away. It doesn't matter who, and it doesn't matter when. Notice the sensation that appears in your body when you think of them. Tension in your jaw, weight in your chest, a hollow feeling in your stomach. That physical reaction is proof that the emotion is still alive. And if it's alive, it's still stealing your freedom. Now ask yourself, do you want to carry that reaction into the next year? Do you want it to keep affecting your relationships, your decisions, your peace, your identity? If the answer is no, and it is no, even if you resist admitting it, then reconciliation is your path. Now, imagine you could say something to this person without consequences, without expectations, without fear of a response. What would you say? Maybe, you hurt me. Maybe, I didn't understand. Maybe, it shouldn't have ended that way. Maybe, I forgive you. Maybe, I forgive myself for allowing it for so long. Whatever the words are, Say them. Not so they can hear them, but so you can release them. Words unspoken rot inside you, and you were not born to carry rotten emotions disguised as strength. Reconciliation in your heart means recognizing your own humanity. It means accepting that you were hurt, that you did the best you could with the awareness you had at the time, that you survived things that felt impossible. It means giving yourself credit for what you endured and giving yourself permission to stop enduring it now. Stoicism was never a philosophy of emotional coldness. It was a philosophy of clarity. Clarity comes when you are brave enough to look at your past without allowing it to rule your present. There are people who will never return to your life but must be released from your mind. There are emotions that should never return, yet you keep feeding them unintentionally. The act of reconciling, even silently, is an act of spiritual maturity. You do it not for them, but for you. You do it not to reopen a bond, but to close a wound. You do it not to change what was, but to protect what will be. In these last days of the year, give yourself this internal gift of courage. Choose one person and release them. It doesn't matter if it was months ago or a decade ago. It doesn't matter if the situation was big or small. It doesn't matter whether it was a friend, a former partner, a family member, or even yourself. Reconciliation is a private act, but the freedom it creates is public. It shows in your eyes, your posture, your patience, your choices, your peace. And when you do it, when you feel something inside loosen, when a weight drops, when your breath expands, you will understand this profound truth. It isn't life that rearranges itself when you reconcile. It is you who regains the strength to rearrange your life. Because nothing weighs more than sustained resentment, and nothing frees you more than releasing it without expecting anything in return. Reconciliation in your heart is an act of emotional sovereignty. It is remembering that your life is not determined by what others did, but by what you choose to do with what remains. The last 20 days of the year are your invitation to let go, not only of objects or habits, but of emotions that have completed their purpose. Peace does not arrive by magic. It arrives when you decide that your freedom matters more than your pride. And when this year closes, when you look back and realize that you're no longer carrying that weight, you'll understand why this principle is so powerful. We are not here to accumulate wounds. We are here to transcend them, and you are ready for that. Because reconciliation is not a gift to the past, it is a gift to your future. Fifth Stoic principle. Do something every day that deliberately makes you uncomfortable. Most people wait to feel ready before taking action, as if clarity would appear on its own, as if motivation would fall from the sky, as if strength depended on mood. But you and I both know that never happens. We know that waiting for comfort is just an elegant way of postponing life. And that is precisely why this principle exists, because no one changes without discomfort. No one becomes strong on soft ground. No one moves forward if they only walk when the weather is perfect. Voluntary discomfort is the soul's secret gym, the only place where discipline becomes muscle, where willpower is forged in silence, where character is refined without witnesses. And you are here because you are ready for more than just surviving these last 20 days of the year. You are ready to stop waiting to feel prepared. There is a truth few are willing to accept. What makes you uncomfortable reveals exactly where you're stuck. What you struggle to face is precisely what you most need to face. Every time you avoid something, not only do you make it bigger, you make yourself smaller in front of it. Voluntary discomfort breaks that pattern. It forces you to walk toward what you fear. It forces you to hold steady where you would normally give in. It forces you to endure where you once retreated. And it is in that small, deliberate, daily act that the soul learns not to back down. The Stoics knew the world would never stop being uncertain, but they also knew they could strengthen themselves faster than the world could wound them. That's why they practiced exercises of austerity, cold exposure, physical effort, intentional restraint, not as punishment, as freedom, because those who choose discomfort no longer fear it. Try a small mental experiment. Think of the exact moment you postponed something for later because you didn't feel like it, because you were tired, because it wasn't the right moment, because you weren't emotionally available. Each of those excuses felt reasonable, but each of them had a cost. And that cost was your strength, your self-trust, your perception of yourself. Voluntary discomfort exists to reverse that silent damage. When you force yourself to do something you don't want to do but know you need, you remind yourself who is in charge. You reclaim internal authority. You reinforce your identity. That is what separates those who change from those who only fantasize about changing. The decision to act even without wanting to. And I'm not talking about heroic discomfort. I'm not asking you to run a marathon tomorrow or become a stoic warrior overnight. I'm talking about small decisions that look insignificant but change your internal architecture. Getting up when your mind begs for 5 more minutes. Training when your body invents excuses. Turning off your phone when your anxiety wants stimulation. Taking a cold shower when your comfort demands warmth. Choosing food that nourishes you when your impulses want to destroy you. Practicing silence when your emotions demand reaction. Those small victories, repeated for 20 days, transform you more than any New Year's resolution ever could. Because you're not entering a new year, you're entering a new version of yourself. Seneca said the soul becomes invincible once it learns not to depend constantly on comfort, and it's true. When you choose voluntary discomfort, you do something profound. You detach your well-being from your circumstances. You stop depending on your emotional weather, on your daily energy, on spontaneous motivation. You become someone capable of doing what must be done, not what you feel like doing. And that makes you dangerous to your own limits. When you discover you can do something uncomfortable today, you discover you can do something bigger tomorrow. A space opens a space you didn't know existed. A space where you see that fear was never a wall, it was a shadow. A shadow that disappears as soon as you walk toward it. But there is something even deeper that makes this principle one of the most important of the entire process. Voluntary discomfort teaches you to trust yourself. When you always choose the easy path, your mind learns a devastating message: I can't handle pain. When you choose the difficult path, even a little, your mind receives a completely different message: I can handle more than I thought. And that message, repeated in small doses, changes your identity. Because identity isn't built with intentions, it's built with evidence. Every act of discomfort is evidence that you are stronger than you were yesterday. And when you collect enough evidence, your mind stops sabotaging you and begins to obey you. Picture yourself 20 days from now, not perfect, not transformed beyond recognition, just stronger. Someone who chose discomfort on purpose. Someone who stopped waiting for motivation and started acting. Not because they wanted to, but because they understood that these 20 days mark the frontier between two versions of yourself. The version that postpones and the version that advances. The version that gives up and the version that resists. The version that seeks immediate pleasure and the version that builds long-lasting fulfillment. Each day is a brick. Each discomfort is a tool. And in 20 days, you can build a foundation that next year will not be able to break. Voluntary discomfort also cleans your mind. Because while you believe your problems come from stress, from people, from work, from time, the truth is, many come from your lack of internal discipline. Your mind dominates you because you've never challenged it. You've never shown it that you hold the reins. When you choose the cold, the silence, the effort, the sacrifice, the mind learns something radically new, that it is not in charge, that it cannot stop you, that it cannot limit you, that it can scream, but you keep moving. And when it learns this, it begins to calm down, because the mind only becomes chaotic when it feels nobody is guiding it. There is something beautiful and brutal about this principle. Voluntary discomfort separates those who want to change from those who will change. Everyone wants transformation. Everyone wants to stop destructive habits, stop excuses, stop patterns that hurt them. But few are willing to step into the discomfort that makes change possible. Few are willing to feel that small inner burn, that resistance, that sting to the ego. But you are. You have made it here, listening to every word. Because you know you're tired of starting over every year. You know you're tired of feeling like you could have been more. You know these 20 days can be the difference between a year that drags you and a year you lead. And listen closely. If you learn to make yourself uncomfortable on purpose, you will never need motivation again. You will own your decisions. You will author your mornings. You will architect your life. Because motivation is unstable, but trained willpower is unbreakable. That is the true gift of this principle, teaching you to rely on your discipline, not your emotional state. So today, choose a small but deliberate discomfort, something that challenges you but is achievable. Do it, repeat it tomorrow, and the day after, and for 20 days. Do it even if it annoys you, even if your mind protests, even if your body resists. Because in that exact space where you want to quit, that is where your next year is being written. The year you deserve. The year you can build. The year where you decide. These last 20 days of the year are not a closure. They are a birth. And discomfort is the first breath of that new life. Sixth Stoic principle. Observe your thoughts as if you were already your future self. There comes a moment in life when you realize you can't keep reacting the way you always have, when you understand you can no longer believe everything your mind tells you, when you can't keep taking so seriously those inner voices that sometimes feel like prophecies but are really just echoes of an unexamined past. That moment arrives when you grow tired of feeling dragged by your impulses, by your raw emotions, by that automatic narrative that tells you who you are, even though you never chose it. And it is precisely in that moment that this principle is born. Observing your thoughts as if you were already your future self is not a poetic exercise. It is an act of power. It places you in a position where you no longer react from your wound, but from your wisdom, from your clarity, from a version of you that isn't trapped in the moment but understands the larger path. Imagine, just for a moment, that your future you truly exists not as fantasy, but as a fully formed identity, a version of yourself that is stronger, more grounded, calmer, more conscious, more in control. That version looks at your current thoughts with a distance you don't have yet, with a maturity you are learning, with a serenity you're training. What would it see? It would see that many of the thoughts that stop you today aren't truths but conditioning, that many of the ideas that limit you don't come from your essence but from your fears, that many of the worries that consume you have no real value. Your future self would notice how quickly you react, how deeply you interpret, how easily you hand over your power to sensations that pass like clouds, sensations you turn into storms. And from that distance, your future self would ask of you exactly what you are about to learn. Observe, do not absorb. Question, do not obey. Interpret with wisdom, not impulsiveness. When you observe your thoughts from this perspective, something profound happens. You discover that you are not your thoughts, that you do not have to believe them, that you are under no obligation to react to every single one. You can watch them appear, shift, dissolve. You can evaluate them as if they were suggestions, not commands. And this creates a separation that the Stoics considered essential, the separation between you and your mind. A separation that allows you to see clearly which thoughts move you toward your future and which keep you chained to your past. Because not every thought deserves your energy. Many only exist to drag you into the same old pattern. Observing like your future self means asking yourself repeatedly, does this thought serve me or sabotage me? Does it move me closer to who I want to become or lock me into who I used to be? Is it wisdom or is it a reflex? This question, asked for 20 days, rewires your entire life. Because your mind will stop believing it can guide you without supervision. It will stop believing it can manipulate you with false urgency. It will stop believing it can use fear, nostalgia, desire, or frustration to dictate your decisions. It will begin to understand that you are in charge, that you govern, that you decide. And when you take that role, your mind stops being a tyrant and becomes a tool. Think of how many times you've acted driven by thoughts that, from the outside, were completely irrational. You thought you were going to fail before trying. You thought someone was angry with you without evidence. You thought you weren't enough for something you eventually accomplished. You thought a problem was the end of the world, only to discover it wasn't. Your future self would look at all of that with a calm smile. You didn't need to suffer like that. That thought was never real. And that is what you are learning now, to stop living according to interpretations that have no foundation. When you observe your thoughts as if you were your future self, you begin to understand something vital. Not every thought represents you. Some are fear. Some are memory. Some are conditioning. Some are childhood wounds. Some are echoes of people who once hurt you and left behind phrases your mind repeats as if they were your own. And you, unknowingly, carry them as truths. But your future self would reject them. That version of you would see each thought with a clarity you are just beginning to cultivate. It would see that many of them deserve nothing more than, "Thanks, mind, but not today." It would see that you can stop feeding internal stories that exist only to limit you. You can begin right now. Each time a thought appears, don't take it as a command. Observe it. Look at it as if it were sitting on a table, separate from you. Ask, does this help me or weigh me down? Does it build or destroy? Does it come from my center or from my fear? If it doesn't serve you, let it pass without fighting it. Don't reject it, don't battle it, don't dramatize it, just release it. The mind calms down when it no longer feels it must defend every idea it produces, and you become stronger when you stop believing that every idea that appears is important. This practice has an extraordinary effect. It makes you hard to manipulate, because external manipulation only works when your internal world is disordered, when you don't distinguish between what you think and what you are. When you confuse impulse with intuition, fear with wisdom, anxiety with truth. But when you observe from your future self, you no longer fall into provocations, no longer get hooked by noise, no longer let opinions pull you off balance, no longer drown in repetitive thoughts. Your mind becomes a safe place, a place where things are evaluated before being felt, where every perception passes through the filter of reason, where every emotion is recognized before being acted out. And there is something even deeper. Observing your thoughts from the future allows you to act like the version you want to become. Because it's not enough to imagine that version, you must start behaving like them now. That version of you does not react impulsively, does not believe every thought, does not poison their mind with invented scenarios, does not sabotage themselves with harsh internal dialogue, does not compare, does not shrink. That version lives from clarity, not chaos. And that clarity is born from observing without absorbing. That is why this principle is essential for these last 20 days of the year. Because you're standing in a decisive moment, a moment where you can repeat your old story or write a new one. And that new story doesn't begin with a heroic act. It begins with a simple practice, viewing your mind from the outside, treating your thoughts the way your future self would, with patience, with intelligence, with discernment, with height. Start today. Each time a thought shakes you, ask, what would my future self do? And then do exactly that. Because that future self doesn't arrive by accident. You are building them now, thought by thought, choice by choice, day by day. Observe, evaluate, choose. That is the deepest way to change your life from within. Seventh Stoic principle. Define a non-negotiable principle and begin living it today. There comes a moment in life when you realize you don't need more goals, more books, more motivation, or more inspirational speeches. What you truly need is a principle. Just one. An inner rule you do not negotiate with anyone, not even with yourself. A core that doesn't bend, a lighthouse that doesn't dim, a boundary that cannot be crossed. Because real change doesn't begin when you start doing more things. It begins when you decide there is something you will never again betray. That is your non-negotiable principle. That is the point where your life stops being accidental and becomes intentional. That is the moment when, for the first time, your future self feels proud of you. The problem is that we spend too many years being flexible with ourselves, too many years excusing our weaknesses, justifying our contradictions, accepting versions of ourselves we never liked but still allowed to exist. That is why this principle has so much power. When you define a non-negotiable rule, you destroy at the root the version of you that sabotages, betrays, and sells itself cheap. And that destruction is freedom. Because nothing strengthens you more than discovering there is something inside you that can't be bought, can't be broken, doesn't change depending on who is watching, and doesn't adjust to the emotional weather of others. Think honestly about this. How many times have you acted against your own judgment just to fit in? How many times have you said yes when your soul was screaming no? How many times have you accepted unfair treatment, hurtful comments, draining relationships, or jobs that killed your peace, simply because you were afraid of seeming difficult or losing something? Every time you yielded, you lost a fragment of strength. Every time you explained what didn't need explaining, you gave away authority. Every time you justified yourself to someone who didn't deserve an explanation, you drifted further from yourself. And the worst part, every one of those moments taught you that you were negotiable, that your value could go on discount, that your identity was adjustable depending on the situation. A non-negotiable principle reverses all of that in an instant, because it forces you to live from a new identity, one that is firmer, clearer, sharper. And you don't need 12 principles, or 10, or 5, just one. The Stoic knows this. Strength doesn't come from accumulating rules, but from obeying one deeply. One that becomes your inner border. It might be, I don't betray myself, or I don't lie, or I don't allow disrespect, or I don't beg for affection, or I don't procrastinate on what I must do, or I don't tolerate anything that steals my peace. This principle is not a motivational slogan. It is a contract with yourself. And as you honor it day after day, even when it's hard, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it costs you, your character sharpens like a blade. Imagine you choose one today. For example, I don't betray myself. Now, look at what that means in practice. It means you will no longer accept conversations that diminish you. You will not tolerate habits that harm you. You will not stay in relationships that chain you. You will not believe thoughts that sink you. It means that every time your impulsiveness tries to drag you back into behaviors that erode your dignity, you will say, "No, I don't break this principle." And that sentence, spoken with inner firmness, transforms your life more than any 20-step plan, because you're no longer reacting from impulse but from identity. You no longer decide based on the emotion of the moment, but on the person you have chosen to be. Here comes the most powerful part. When you define a principle, you eliminate thousands of future decisions. You no longer have to wonder whether you should accept something or not. If it respects your principle, yes. If it violates it, no. So simple, so direct, so liberating. The mind calms when it has a clear moral direction. The heart strengthens when it knows there are lines it will not cross, even when it hurts. And the soul rests when it discovers there is something within you that remains untouched no matter the circumstances. Over these final 20 days of the year, practice this principle as a full rehearsal for the life you intend to live next year. Every day will test you. Every conversation will train you. Every impulse will examine you. And it doesn't matter how many times you fail, what matters is that you do not forget to try again. Because the goal is not perfection, it is becoming someone you can trust. Someone who can say, "What I decide today, I will stand by tomorrow." That is the true meaning of maturity. That is the most intimate act of self-respect. As you move forward, you will begin to notice something extraordinary. Your environment will change. People who used to cross your boundaries will begin to step back. Others will disappear not because you reject them, but because they can no longer manipulate or influence you the way they did before. And new people will arrive, more aligned, more authentic, more respectful. Because life works like this. What you defend, defends you. What you protect, protects you. What you uphold, upholds you. But more importantly, you will change. You will see yourself differently in the mirror, not because of your appearance, but because of your eyes. Because you will know that even though you are still in process, you are no longer someone who abandons themselves. You are no longer someone who needs to explain themselves. You are no longer someone who negotiates their dignity. You are no longer someone split between what they want and what they do. You are someone who chose a principle and lives it. And here is the final key. The principle you choose must not only be non-negotiable, it must be elevated. It must reflect not who you have been, but who you want to become. Because this is not an exercise in repair. It is an exercise in creation. You are building character. You are building a standard. You are building a version of yourself that didn't exist before. And precisely that is what makes these last 20 days capable of changing your entire life. Choose your principle today. Write it, repeat it, live it. Let it be your boundary, your anchor, and your compass. And when the new year arrives, you will not need fresh resolutions, because you will already have something much stronger. A code. A sacred pact with yourself that will transform the way you speak, act, relate, decide, think, and feel. This is internal revolution. This is philosophy applied. This is real freedom. 8th Stoic principle. Take inventory without self-deception. There are moments in the year when life demands the full truth without makeup, without excuses, without the soft stories you use to protect yourself from seeing what hurts. This is one of those moments. And that is why this principle is as uncomfortable as it is transformative. Take inventory without self-deception. Not an inventory that makes you look good. Not an inventory meant to soothe you. Not an inventory full of motivational lines or interpretations that turn a mediocre year into a heroic tale. No, a real inventory. raw, honest. One in which you strip yourself bare and say without shaking, "This I did well, and this I did not. Here I was strong, and here I was a coward. Here I acted with awareness, and here I let myself be dragged by my impulses." Because no one changes from a lie. No one becomes strong through denial. No one evolves by saying, "It wasn't that bad. At least I tried. It could have been worse." Those phrases sound kind, but they weaken your character. The Stoic knows. A life examined gently doesn't transform. It transforms when you have the courage to see yourself without decoration, when you stop justifying your failures. When you accept, without resistance, that some of your choices were not mistakes, they were conscious self-deceptions. Those moments when you knew exactly what you were doing and still acted as if you didn't. Search your memory. Look at this year as if you were watching it from above, like an impartial observer. Remember the times you said, "I'll start tomorrow," knowing tomorrow would be just like today. Remember the times you sabotaged yourself in silence. Remember the promises you made and broke with the same ease with which you spoke them. Remember the conversations where you stayed silent instead of saying what needed to be said. Remember the opportunities you let slip because of fear. Remember the relationships you maintained out of habit, not love. Remember the habits that consumed you and still slept beside you every night. This is the time to look at them without softening them. And no, this isn't done to punish yourself, or to sink yourself, or to feel guilt. That would be another form of self-deception, because guilt immobilizes you and traps you inside yourself. The Stoic does not seek guilt, he seeks understanding. Understanding what shaped each decision, understanding what emotion held the steering wheel, understanding when and where you gave away your power, understanding where you stopped being you. A real inventory doesn't seek tears, it seeks clarity. And clarity hurts. It hurts because it shows you that you weren't always a victim of circumstances. Sometimes you were an accomplice. It hurts because it reminds you that every time you chose the easy path, you paid a price. It hurts because it reveals that there were real, not imaginary opportunities you didn't take because you feared becoming the person who would have taken them. It hurts because it demands that you admit some of your biggest problems didn't come from the world. They came from you. But something deeper also happens. When you see your whole truth, something inside you wakes up. As if a warrior who had been asleep for years rose. Not to judge you, to guide you. It rises to say, "This does not define you, but it does reveal you. And what it reveals is exactly what you need to move forward." That revelation is the foundation of all real growth. You cannot improve what you're unwilling to see without filters. Think of Marcus Aurelius, reviewing his conduct each night with brutal honesty, no unnecessary praise, no excuses. He knew that self-deception is an elegant form of slavery. Because as long as you lie to yourself, you will continue to repeat what destroys you. As long as you justify weak habits, you will remain weak. As long as you soften your errors, you will keep believing they are not that bad. And so another year passes, and another, until one day you wake up and realize the life you wanted to live never began because you were afraid to look at the life you were actually living. But you are not here to repeat that. You are here to face your own ledger. To open your internal notebooks, your emotional records, your mental patterns, and analyze them with the precision of a philosopher and the bravery of a warrior. Ask yourself, what did I do this year that truly makes me proud? Don't minimize it. Name it. Remember it. Honor it. Then ask, which choices did I make that took me further away from who I want to become? Don't disguise them. Don't revise them. Don't shrink them. Look at them as if they were stones on the road. They are there, they weigh, but they can be moved once you acknowledge them. Now ask yourself the hardest question. How many times did I know exactly what I needed to do and still didn't do it? Right there in that gap lies the distance between the life you live and the life you could live. And yes, that distance hurts, but seeing it also frees you, because it shows you that you don't need to change the world to change your life. You need to change your decisions. You need to stop negotiating with your own principles. You need to stop telling yourself stories to avoid discomfort. Here lies the magic of this principle. When you take inventory without self-deception, you don't just see your failures, you see the entire map. You see why you stumbled. You see what weakened you. You see what strengthened you. You see which people were light and which were shadow. You see which habits destroyed you and which saved you. You see which thoughts repeat and which must be eliminated. You see which boundaries you failed to set and which you must set now. And in that map, one thing becomes undeniable. You were never as lost as you believed. You were simply looking at your path through the fog of denial. But now, for the first time, you can see it clearly. Not perfectly, not indulgently, clearly. And with that clarity, you can make real decisions, not impulses dressed as change. You can enter these last 20 days of the year with an intention born not from enthusiasm, but from lucidity. And lucidity is power. That is why this inventory is not an emotional exercise. It is an act of spiritual strength. It is saying, I no longer run from myself. I no longer lie to myself. I no longer repeat what destroys me. I no longer justify myself to anyone. I am no longer a spectator of my own life. And when you say this with truth, without embellishment, without drama, without trembling, something inside you aligns, solidifies, strengthens. That alignment is the beginning of real transformation. Take inventory, write it down. Read your failures to your own conscience. Confront what you avoided all year. Look at your shadow without lowering your gaze. Because the one who dares to know themselves without softening their darkness is the one who conquers their light without fear. Ninth Stoic principle. Change one daily behavior you know is destroying you. There comes a point on the path of growth where you can no longer hide behind elegant excuses. A point where self-deception becomes unbearable. A point where you finally admit something you've been avoiding for far too long. You don't need to change your entire life. You only need to change one daily behavior that you and only you know is slowly destroying you. I'm not talking about any random habit. I'm talking about that behavior you recognize the moment it's mentioned, the one that always appears quietly when no one is looking, the one that drains your energy, clarity, strength, or dignity, the one you've promised to change so many times you've lost count of the broken promises, the one that if you stopped it today would change everything about your destiny. Every person knows what theirs is. You don't have to say it out loud. You don't need to explain it. You already feel it. Sometimes it's an obvious vice. Eating out of anxiety, checking your phone every 5 minutes, spending money to fill emotional voids, consuming content that numbs you, making impulsive decisions you regret later. Sometimes it's subtler. Procrastinating tasks, avoiding important conversations, staying up late for no reason, feeding thoughts that fuel your insecurity, filling your mind with noise so you don't have to hear your inner truth. But whatever it is, something inside you whispers every day. This is draining you. This is taking your power. This is pulling you away from the life you say you want to build. And here is the Stoic truth, simple, sharp, and inescapable. You don't need to change 20 things to transform yourself. You don't need to tear yourself down to rebuild. You don't need an emotional revolution. You only need to attack 1.1 with the full force of your will. Because deep change doesn't come from quantity, it comes from consistency. And a daily behavior holds brutal power over your identity. It is like a river cutting through stone, slowly, quietly, without drama, but absolutely relentless. That small thing you repeat every day becomes the silent architect of your character. That's why this principle doesn't ask you to change your whole life. It asks you something harder. Identify one behavior you know too well and cut it off like you would cut off a toxic bond. No negotiation, no softening, no emotional extensions. A direct, mature, stoic decision. Because if you keep waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect year, the perfect emotional state, you will die waiting. Life changes when you change one small act you repeat daily, because that act sends a message to your mind. I choose not my impulses. And when your mind receives that message repeatedly, it begins to reprogram itself. Look at yourself honestly. Ask, which behavior is taking more from me than it gives? Don't lie. Don't minimize it. Don't say, it's not that bad. You know exactly which one it is. Remember the last time you repeated it. How did you feel afterward? Probably immediate relief, followed by guilt, exhaustion, frustration, that sour feeling of having betrayed yourself once again. Now imagine how you'd feel if you didn't repeat it anymore. Not tomorrow, not in January. Today. Imagine the strength you'd reclaim, the clarity that would return to your mind, the self-respect that would rise the moment you finally stopped justifying the unjustifiable. This is the heart of Stoicism. Freedom is not built from wishing, it is built from choosing. And this choice won't be glamorous, it won't be dramatic. No one will applaud you. No one will even know. No one will congratulate you for changing. But you will. You'll feel it in your bones. You'll feel something inside you align. You'll feel your mind stabilize. You'll feel your spirit stop cracking. You'll feel, finally, that you acted like the person you want to become, not like the person your weakness drags you into being. But let's go deeper. Why is it so hard to let go of this behavior? Because it gives you something. It supports something in you. It offers an illusion of relief, an emotional drug that works for minutes. It soothes your day, but destroys your year. And that is what makes it dangerous. It seems small. The Stoic knows that small things shape us most. A small thought repeated daily becomes a belief. A small habit repeated daily becomes identity. A small surrender repeated daily becomes mediocrity. And a small victory repeated daily becomes character. So why does this behavior still live in you? Because you have protected it. Because you excuse it. Because you justify it with, there are worse things. It's not that big a deal. I do so many other things right. But you're not here to speak to yourself like someone weak. You're here to confront yourself like someone strong, without filters, without decorations, without lies. You're here to say, this behavior is taking my life. It is taking my years. It is taking my peace. It is taking my power, and I am ready to let it go. And yes, letting it go will bring discomfort, internal resistance, fear, anxiety, impatience. That voice in your head saying, one more day won't hurt. Don't be so hard on yourself. You always go back to this. That is the voice that has ruled your life. That is the voice that keeps you small. That is the voice that wants you weak. The Stoic looks it in the eye and replies, not today, again and again, not today. And that act, repeated for 20 days, doesn't just destroy the habit, it rebuilds you. Imagine ending this year having changed one behavior that has limited you for years. Imagine entering the next cycle, knowing you didn't wait for the calendar to save you. Imagine seeing yourself sovereign over your impulses, owner of your mind, ruler of your destiny. That is the real reward, not the new year. Not the romantic idea of new year, new life. The real change is looking at your shadow and saying, you don't run this anymore, and you don't need anyone to understand it. You don't need to explain it. You don't need validation. This change is between you and you, between your weakness and your strength, between the version of you that destroys you and the version waiting for you on the other side. If you choose to change this behavior today, you change your story, not because it's a grand gesture, but because you change the deepest point of your programming, your relationship with yourself. Do it. Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready. Do it today. Because the day you change one behavior that destroys you, you change the root of all your decisions. You change your perception. You change your energy. You change your destiny. And right there, in that exact moment, without noise, without celebration, without an audience, you discover that you are capable of far more than you ever imagined. 10th Stoic principle. Give your free time a noble purpose. There is a kind of wealth most people waste without even noticing. It isn't money, reputation, or talent. It is something far more valuable and far more fragile. Free time. Those pockets of space between obligations where no one demands anything from you, no one supervises you, no one pressures you. Those moments in which you could do anything, and precisely because of that, many choose what slowly destroys them. Free time is a brutal mirror. It reveals exactly who you are when no one is watching. And most people, without realizing it, reveal weakness. They reveal confusion. They reveal dependence. They reveal emptiness. They reveal that, even though they say they want to transform their lives, in those unguarded minutes they choose what keeps them exactly the same. The Stoics saw this with a clarity we've almost lost today. They knew the quality of your empty moments determines the quality of your entire life. They knew a person can meet every responsibility and still fail inwardly if every moment of freedom is filled with noise. That understanding gave rise to this principle. Give your free time a noble purpose. Don't kill it. Don't fill it impulsively. Don't hand it over carelessly. Treat it for what it truly is, the moment when you sculpt your character. Think about your recent days. Recall those moments where you finished a task, a conversation, an errand, and suddenly had a few minutes to yourself. What did you do? Did you open your phone and disappear into the infinite abyss of superficial content? Did you turn on music just to avoid hearing your own thoughts? Did you reach for quick distractions that gave the illusion of rest but left you emptier? Or did you use that instant to observe your mind, to organize your ideas, to reconnect with yourself, to grow even a millimeter? The difference between a life that advances and a life that stagnates is almost always defined in those pockets of time. Not in big moments, not in heroic decisions, not in deep revelations. It is defined by what you do when you have 5 minutes free, in a waiting room, in bed, before sleep, walking down the street, after eating, after work. Because that's where your true nature emerges. And if in those moments you choose noise, empty comfort, automatic distraction, you train your mind to live on autopilot. But if you choose presence, clarity, reflection, reading, silence, writing, or meditation, you train your mind to live with intention. The Stoics lived by an unwritten mantra, let no moment be wasted. This does not mean an obsessive life. It does not mean turning yourself into a machine of constant productivity. It simply means understanding the mechanism. What you do when no one forces you is what forms you. What you choose when it's easier not to choose is what reveals your discipline. What you do with your free time shows whether you own your life or remain a prisoner of your impulses. Now look at your present with honesty. Look at how you fill your breaks. Look at what you reach for when you want to avoid thinking. Look at what you do when you feel tired or overwhelmed. Look at what you choose when you tell yourself, just a little bit won't hurt. That little bit builds you or breaks you, brings you closer or pulls you away, strengthens you or weakens you. There is no neutrality. No small habit is neutral. Every tiny action you repeat in your free time becomes a thread in the fabric of your identity. This principle doesn't ask you to spend every free moment reading, learning, or improving. It's not about turning life into an impossible marathon. It's about choosing nobility. What does that mean? It means that when you have free time, you ask, does this action honor the person I want to become? If the answer is yes, continue. If the answer is no, stop. Because often, what destroys you the most isn't what you do in big moments, it's what you tolerate in small ones. And free time is full of hidden micro-decisions. Opening a social app without thinking, consuming something that dulls your mind, acting out of inertia, sabotaging your rest, escaping from yourself. Imagine how your life would change if, for the next 20 days, you used your free time with intention. Not to become perfect, not to become a monk, but to make those minutes elevate you instead of draining you. Imagine it. Instead of distracting yourself, you breathe. Instead of numbing yourself, you write one line about how you feel. Instead of fleeing silence, you walk for 3 minutes observing your surroundings. Instead of feeding your mind digital trash, you read a paragraph. Instead of checking notifications, you do a quick emotional inventory. What am I thinking? What am I needing? What am I avoiding? It seems small, but it isn't. It is slow, profound, irreversible reprogramming. The Stoics saw these gestures as gymnastics of the soul. Just as a muscle strengthens through repetition, your character strengthens through small decisions repeated during the quiet spaces of your day. That is where your spirit grows. That is where clarity is born. That is where you find the kind of peace that doesn't come from the outside, but from knowing your actions, even the smallest ones, align with your values. Because nothing gives more tranquility than seeing you are living according to your principles. Here's a truth few want to admit. The way you use your free time reveals your relationship with your future. If you use it to escape, it's because you fear who you might become. If you use it to numb yourself, it's because you don't want to face what must be changed. If you use it to grow even a little, it's because you're already building the person you say you're searching for. Free time is a preview. It shows the life you will have tomorrow, because tomorrow won't magically bring discipline, clarity, or willpower. Tomorrow you will be exactly what you are training today in your free moments. You don't need to turn every break into an achievement. You need to turn it into an act of self-respect. Honor it. Treat it as what it is. A fragment of freedom that, if used well, transforms you. Maybe you've spent years thinking free time is for doing nothing. But even in that nothing, deep decisions are made. Does your rest heal your mind or pollute it? Do you seek silence or noise? Do you seek calm or stimulation? Do you seek to rebuild yourself or avoid yourself? That is the central question. What kind of rest are you allowing? The beauty of this principle is that you don't need infinite strength or wisdom or emotional stability. You only need intention. You only need one repeated question in each free moment. Does this strengthen me or weaken me? And then act with coherence, nothing more. You don't need to change your whole life. You only need to fill your free spaces with noble decisions, and you'll see everything else begin to align effortlessly. Do this for 20 days. Do it out of self-respect. Do it because you know you can't keep living on autopilot. Do it because deep down you're tired of not being who you could be. Do it because a life lived without intention is a life wasted. And you are not here to waste yourself. You are here to awaken. 11th Stoic principle. Be grateful for this year, even if it was hard. There's a phrase many people repeat without truly grasping its depth. Be grateful for what you lived. But when life breaks you, when someone betrays you, when you lose something you loved, when your plans collapse, when you feel like you're moving forward with your soul dragging behind you, gratitude almost feels like an insult. It feels like asking a wounded heart to smile while it bleeds, like forcing an exhausted mind to find light in the middle of a tunnel that never seems to end. But the Stoics saw gratitude from a completely different angle, one far from the superficial optimism sold today. Stoic gratitude does not deny pain. It does not force you to beautify what shattered you. It does not soften your wounds with motivational slogans. It is something far more mature, raw, and transformative. Recognizing that every difficulty reveals something you needed to see, something that, without that impact, you might have continued ignoring while it quietly destroyed you. As the year comes to an end, most people look back with a mix of nostalgia, shame, and frustration. They say, I didn't achieve what I wanted. I wasn't who I hoped to be. I failed too much. I made mistakes. I wasted time. But they rarely understand that this year, even with its shadows, was training. Not punishment, not regression, not condemnation. Training. And training, by definition, hurts. Not because it is cruel, but because it prepares you. That is how Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus saw the world, as a vast school where every loss, every mistake, every disappointment, and every obstacle had a specific purpose. A purpose that does not depend on whether you like it, only on whether you are willing to learn from it. And learning requires courage. If this year was hard, it does not mean it was a failure. It means it exposed something you kept sweeping under the rug. It revealed fragility you didn't want to accept, dependence you preferred to ignore, insecurity you hid well, patterns you kept repeating unconsciously, relationships that were never truly aligned with you, decisions you kept postponing, potential you were betraying, strength you didn't know you had. None of that is comfortable. None of it is gentle. But all of it is necessary if you want to end these 20 days as a stronger version of yourself. Stoic gratitude does not ask you to say, "Thank you for suffering." It asks you to understand what the suffering taught you, to look at your pain without turning it into identity, to observe your loss without making it an eternal story, to look at your past without bowing to it. The Stoic gives thanks, not because everything went well, but because everything that happened had a place in their formation. Gratitude is accepting reality with dignity. It is looking at what was without wishing it had been different. It is telling yourself, if this happened, it was part of the path I needed in order to become who I must be. Look back on your year with that perspective. Revisit the moments that broke you. Don't sugarcoat them. Don't deny them. Don't cover them. Observe them with serenity. What did they reveal about you? What did they show about the way you love, trust, work, care for yourself, relate to yourself? What did they uncover? What did they awaken? What did they cut away? What did they force you to face after years of avoidance? That is the real gift of difficult years. They force you awake. Because no one wakes up while celebrating. We wake up when something hurts enough to open our eyes. When you give thanks for a hard year, you're not celebrating what was done to you. You are acknowledging what you built from it. You are acknowledging that you're still here, that you didn't give up, that you stood up even when you had no strength left, that you kept walking even when the ground burned beneath you, that you kept breathing even when the world pressed heavily on your chest. That simple fact of still being alive, conscious, seeking something better, is already a victory. Not a loud victory, not one of applause or material accomplishments. A silent, deep, personal victory. A victory only known by those who have walked through their own darkness and chosen to continue. Many believe gratitude is weakness, but it is the opposite. It is one of the greatest expressions of strength. Someone unable to feel gratitude even when life was unfair is someone who still feels like a victim of destiny. Someone who can be grateful recognizes they do not control what happens, but they control how they interpret it. Being grateful for a hard year is saying, "I didn't choose everything I lived, but I choose what I do with it." That phrase, lived truthfully, makes you unbreakable, because you stop being life's toy and become its apprentice. Think about this. If this year had been perfect, no friction, no conflict, no falls, would you even be here, listening to this, committed to transforming yourself, ready to work through these 20 days with the intensity you're showing? Of course not. Pain brought you here. Exhaustion brought you here. Disappointment brought you here. The fatigue of repeating old patterns brought you here. The sense that you deserve a different life brought you here. None of that would exist without an imperfect year. Your desire for change was born in the mud, not in the garden. And that, although hard to accept, is something to be grateful for. Stoic gratitude frees you because it makes you responsible. It lets you look at life without resentment. It helps you understand that even what you didn't want played a role in your development. It helps you release anger and make room for clarity. It allows you to close the year without dragging invisible chains. It lets you look forward without ghosts. It lets you walk lightly not because you forgot the pain, but because you understood it. And once something is understood, it stops chasing you. Imagine finishing these 20 days with mature gratitude, not naive gratitude. Gratitude that says, "I wouldn't change anything I lived, because everything contributed to my strength." Imagine entering the next year not with the illusion that things will magically be better, but with the certainty that you will be better. Imagine carrying within you a peace that no longer depends on external events, because you recognize that everything that happened was part of your path. That is what this principle invites you to build. And you don't need a grand gesture to be grateful. You only need 1 minute of silence to tell yourself the truth. I made it through. That phrase, spoken consciously, is a declaration of power. It means that nothing that happened was enough to destroy your ability to begin again. It means that no matter how hard it was, it didn't break your essence. It means your spirit is still here, ready to rise once more. Be grateful, even if it hurts. Be grateful, even if you still don't understand. Be grateful, even if you don't yet know how to move forward. Be grateful because in that act lies a profound message. I accept life as it came, and from here, I transform it. That is the core of Stoicism. That is the heart of change. That is the beginning of your true freedom. 12th Stoic principle. Decide who you will no longer be. There is a moment in life, a silent one nobody celebrates, one that never appears in photos or on social media, when a human being finally understands that real transformation does not begin the day you discover who you want to become, but the day you admit, with brutal honesty, who you are no longer willing to be. That small, almost invisible instant marks the beginning of an inner revolution. Because as long as you remain the same version of yourself that brought you here, nothing will change. You can desire new outcomes, write new goals, imagine new beginnings, but if your identity stays tied to the same habits, the same wounds, the same patterns, the same excuses, and the same fears, You will repeat the year as if trapped in a loop. The Stoics understood this. Wanting to be better is not enough. A part of you must die, the part that quietly sabotages your life. Deciding who you will no longer be is perhaps the bravest act your soul will perform in these last days of the year, because it means looking directly at the versions of yourself you've protected out of habit, not out of virtue. It means acknowledging the laziness you excused as tiredness, the indecision you disguised as caution, the fear you covered with perfectionism, the people-pleasing you hid under the label of kindness, the suppressed anger you justified as a strong personality, the emotional fragility you defended as deep sensitivity. None of these versions are bad in themselves, but without mastery, they enslave you to impulses that pull you away from the life you claim to want. The Stoics taught that a free person is one who governs themselves, and self-governance means knowing which parts of your character need to be transcended, not protected. No deep transformation is born from comfort. Transformation begins in renunciation. And renouncing does not mean losing. Renouncing means declaring that something no longer has permission to direct your life. That is why this final principle does not ask you to add something new. It asks you to cut away what holds you back, to identify which version of you must end before the year does. Do an inner inventory. Think back on the last 12 months of your life. Remember the moments when you acted from your worst self, when you spoke without thinking, when you stayed silent out of fear, when you put yourself last, when you chose ease over integrity, when you returned to habits you already knew were destroying you, when you allowed treatment that diminished you, when you accepted emotional crumbs, when you convinced yourself you didn't deserve more, when you begged for validation, when you avoided necessary conversations, when you dimmed your own strength so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable. That version of you served a purpose at some point. Maybe it protected you, maybe it helped you survive, but today it no longer serves you. Today it is the weight you must release. Deciding who you will no longer be is just as important as defining your goals. Because life does not change by adding things. It changes by removing what blocks you. Stop being the one who procrastinates. Stop being the one who self-sabotages right when progress appears. Stop being the one who promises more than they deliver. Stop being the one who needs motivation to do what must be done. Stop being the one who hides behind their past. Stop being the one who explains themselves too much. Stop being the one who trades their power for the fear of being alone. These renunciations are worth more than any list of resolutions. They are the foundation of a strong character. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his journal, "You cannot move toward virtue while protecting your old self." A harsh line, but true. Your old self is an expert at ruining opportunities, repeating old stories, convincing you that a little more complacency won't hurt, whispering that you'll change later, that you're not ready, that it's not worth it. But if you allow that version of you to keep governing your behavior, then you don't have to wait for December 31st. Your next year is already written. And it will be the same. Equally lukewarm, equally confusing, equally full of excuses wrapped in elegant justifications. That is why this principle invites you to let that version die without ceremony. To recognize that the life you want cannot be built on the behavior of the life you no longer want. Look at yourself from the outside for a moment. Ask, which part of me was responsible for my biggest setbacks this year? Do not look for external culprits. It wasn't your boss, partner, parents, or circumstances. It was one of your own patterns, one of your habits, one of your interpretations. A thought you fed, a reaction you didn't regulate, a fear you obeyed. Identify it, name it, because what you do not name rules you, and what you name, you can transform. The Stoics didn't strive to become perfect beings. They aim to become conscious beings. Consciousness is the first step toward freedom, seeing your shadow without running from it. Because once you can see it, you can choose to release it. That is the true power of this principle. It forces you into a moment of ruthless honesty with yourself. And honesty, although painful, is the noblest tool for anyone who wishes to change their destiny. In these final 20 days of the year, don't try to do more. Try to be less of what destroys you, less of what drains you, less of what distances you from your purpose, less of the person who postpones everything, less of the one who betrays themselves to belong, less of the one who loses patience at the slightest inconvenience, less of the one who speaks of discipline but never practices it, less of the one who asks for love where none exists, less of the one who settles for less than they know they deserve. This reduction, this inner decluttering, is the first step toward the version of you that you do want to build. And when you decide who you will no longer be, something extraordinary happens. The future opens. Not because circumstances magically change, but because you change your relationship with them. Life transforms at the exact moment you say, "I will not repeat this anymore." That act is a line drawn in the sand, a declaration of personal independence, a signal that you are no longer the same, that you are ready to carry your life instead of letting your life carry you. This final principle does not ask you to be perfect. It asks you to be courageous, to have the bravery to abandon versions of yourself that no longer fit the life you claim to want, to shed the old layers that no longer belong to your identity, to accept that growth is not accumulation, growth is letting go, to understand that you cannot move forward while clinging to the version of you that keeps you stuck. So ask yourself here, now, without softening the answer, who will I no longer be starting today? The answer doesn't need poetry, it needs truth. And once you have it, keep it, write it, repeat it every morning, act from it, and let these final days of the year be the silent funeral of your old self and the birth of the version that has been waiting all along for you to choose it. There was a moment, maybe during these last few minutes, when you felt something shift inside you, an uncomfortable thought, a truth you had been avoiding, a possibility you hadn't allowed yourself to consider. And what you felt wasn't fleeting motivation, it was a calling. A silent, ancient, profound calling. The one that reminds you that you are still on time to become someone who does not betray their own limits, someone who does not abandon themselves, someone who refuses to keep postponing their life. Because changing your life in the last 20 days of the year is not an exaggerated promise. It is a declaration of war against the version of you that always leaves everything for later. It is the most dignified act you can offer yourself before this cycle ends. Look at yourself for a moment without running away. Think about how many times you believed you would change, when everything settled, when you had more energy, when there was more time, when January came. But that January never came to rescue you. Because January transforms no one. Life changes when you change, and those final 20 days, the ones most people consider lost, can become the most fertile territory of your entire year. Because they are days when you stop pretending, days where there is no space left for long excuses, days where time becomes a mirror and forces you to ask who you want to be before the calendar resets. You know, though you've avoided it, that there has always been a weak point, a habit, an excuse, a leak of energy you've been allowing. Like a thin, almost invisible thread that holds the weight of your emotional life, slowly wearing down while you ignored it. And now that thread is about to break, not to destroy you, but to free you. Because what breaks when it no longer serves creates space for what truly matters. And these last 20 days of the year are not a countdown, they are a threshold, a limit. A psychological and spiritual frontier where you decide whether you will keep dragging the version of you that gets tired, repeats itself, postpones everything, or whether you will allow another version to be born. Let me tell you something with the bluntness life demands. No deep change feels comfortable at the beginning. No step toward your strength will ever feel soft. These final days will not welcome you with flowers. They will give you tests. They will expose your procrastination. They will pull your patterns to the surface. They will confront your lack of discipline. But there, right there where you used to retreat, you can choose to stay, to breathe, to observe, to resist the impulse to give up. And when you hold your ground at the point where you used to break, your inner universe changes. The chemistry of your spirit rearranges. The structure of your decisions strengthens. You become someone who no longer waits for a new year to feel new. And as you listen to these words, a thought may hit you with honesty. I'm not lacking motivation. I'm lacking decision. And yes, that's true. But decision doesn't come from enthusiasm. It comes from being tired of repeating the same story, from the dignified shame of seeing your potential wasted, from the clarity of knowing that if you don't do something different now, you will end up repeating the same year over and over again. Changing your life in the last 20 days of the year is not an act of speed. It is an act of identity. It is choosing who you will be when no one is watching. Maybe this year hurt you. Maybe it took things you loved. Maybe it left you with scars you didn't ask for. But perhaps it also prepared you for this moment. Because sometimes, before the rebirth, comes the fall. And that fall does not define the end, it defines the beginning of the ascent. You are not late. You are not too broken. You are not too tired. You are exactly where you need to be to become aware. The final stretch of the year is not a closure, it is an awakening. Imagine, just for a second, what it would feel like to end this year with inner dignity, not with perfect goals achieved, not with a calendar full of accomplishments, but with the certainty that for 20 days you were someone who did not abandon themselves. Someone who closed chapters, cleaned spaces, organized their mind, faced truths, released what was heavy, embraced what mattered, walked with intention, breathed with purpose, and acted with strength. Imagine reaching the last day of the year looking at yourself in the mirror without reproach, with respect, with calm, with firmness. That is worth more than any goal you may set for next year. Life aligns when you align within. Opportunities arrive when you arrive to yourself. Relationships change when you change your energy. The world reorganizes when you stop betraying yourself. That is why the last days of the year are not a formality. They are a spiritual training ground. An intimate space where you rehearse the life you want to live in January, February, March, and beyond. No one is going to do it for you. No one will push you. No one will save you. But you can save yourself through small, steady, unwavering decisions. Decisions that, when accumulated, create a new identity. And if right now you feel that impulse, that mix of fear and determination, that inner voice whispering, "It's now," then follow that voice. Because that voice is the version of you that has already seen who you can become and is tired of waiting. If something inside you felt relief, clarity, or strength while hearing this reflection, then don't ignore it. Follow us. Subscribing is not a favor to this podcast. It is an act of respect toward yourself. It is your way of saying, "I will not walk asleep anymore. I will not let the year decide for me. I am the one in control." And share this with someone who needs it, because one awakened mind awakens another. Breathe. Feel this moment. And remember, you don't need the world to change. You need to change yourself. And these last 20 days can be the beginning of the life you always wanted, if you decide it will be. See you in the next episode. And until then, don't forget this. You are still on time. You have always been on time. Today is your last opportunity. And also, your first. Your voice matters here more than you think. Every insight you share strengthens and elevates this community, because this isn't just another space. It's a circle of people who choose to live with intention, with discipline, and with character. Each of you leaves a mark, and the reflection that receives the most support will be pinned as a banner of who we are. Not as decoration, but as a reminder of the kind of warrior who chooses to think, feel, and act with stoic clarity. Because this is a community that doesn't run from pain, it walks through it with courage. A community that doesn't look for cheap comfort, it seeks wisdom. A community that doesn't break under adversity, it turns it into strength. And if you've made it this far, it's because something inside you is already shifting. Something is waking up. Something is asking for more. So, before you leave, check the description. There you'll find the paths we created to help you keep strengthening your mind. They're not there by accident. Each one exists to help you go deeper, build inner resilience, and return again and again to that place within you where nothing and no one can take your peace. Subscribing isn't doing the podcast a favor. It's an act of respect toward yourself. It's choosing not to live on autopilot anymore. It's committing to think differently, to feel with more order, to live with more intention. Because every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we publish reflections designed to stay with you when life gets heavy, when your mind gets loud, when you need a reminder of who you are. Not following us means risking missing the one lesson you might need in the hardest moment. And if you choose to go a step further, if you choose to become a member, understand one thing clearly. You're not donating, you're sustaining a mission. Because of you, this flame stays alive. Because of you, we can keep spreading Stoicism as a refuge for millions who are fighting not to give up. Your support is what keeps this podcast alive, strong, and growing. You're not a spectator, you're part of the foundation holding this community together. I'll see you in our next Stoicism for Winners session, where we'll keep exploring the depth of Stoic wisdom applied to everyday life. In the meantime, dive into the recommended sessions in the description and continue your path. And until we cross paths again, don't forget this. You are the master of your perception, the guardian of your peace, and the warrior of your own battle. That is the legacy of Stoicism. That is the art of becoming invincible.